Hello. It's our final day of Voices 2023. I'm Imran Ahmed, founder and CEO of the Business of Fashion. It's a pleasure to welcome the BOF professional community from all around the world to our live stream from here in the English countryside. We've got a full day ahead of us. Just to give you a sense of the vibe here in Oxfordshire this morning, it's chilly. There's a layer of frost that I woke up to this morning. It reminded me of those Canadian winters. Everyone's feeling a little cozy. We have toques. In Canada, we call those wool hat toques. People are feeling ready for our session on global culture and creativity, followed by my favorite Live Your Best Life session later this afternoon. This morning, we're going to travel the world of Hollywood, stopping through Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and London along the way. So as you're following us on this journey, don't forget to join the global conversation using the hashtag BOF Voices. Please share your feedback in the chat window next to the video player. And to start, type out where you're joining us from today. And maybe if you've been with us the past few days, what have your highlights been? Who are the speakers that you have left you with great impressions to take back to your work? But without further ado, it's time to get started. To some, creativity is a rare gift from nature, something only the fortunate few are born with. But our next speaker is here to remind us that creativity is innate in all of us. Some of you were lucky enough to experience Keith Yamashita's salon here last night. And we wanted to bring some of that magic to the amphitheater this morning. So Keith is kindly sharing a condensed version of his workshop from last night here on the Voices stage. Now, when I came back from my own salon, I heard a lot of feedback about Keith's salon. Apparently, it was quite an interesting conversation. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Keith, a visionary at the intersection of creativity and ethics. He is the founder and chair of SY Partners, which works with leaders to build human-centered organizations. He's worked along the likes of Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey, Howard Schultz, the Dalai Lama, and my friend Rachel Shechtman, who introduced me to Keith earlier this year. His focus is on building capacity for loving kindness through imagination. And when you came in, you found some materials to use during this talk, which were placed on your seats. If you're watching at home or at the office or on your mobile phone on the live stream, you can click on the link to download those materials now onto your device so you can participate as well. Please welcome Keith Yamashita.
Wow. So I don't know if this is happening to you in this conference. Earthlings, are you okay? But to me, I was wondering whether maybe, just maybe, the universe is on our side. You know, if you think about this preciousness of this vessel, this body we have been given, perhaps the universe is actually with us. And I was imagining, musing after the salon last night, if the universe were to write us a letter, what would it tell us? And then I woke up to a letter in my room this morning. Would you mind closing your eyes for a second while I read to you what the universe might be trying to tell us? Dear Earthlings, we are sending our love. How are you doing? Truly. We see you down there with the planet on fire, with wars that have broken out and cannot seem to be contained, with news cycles ravaging your hearts, and the uncertainty of buckling strains on the systems that undergird your very trust in each other. This could be a hard time to be human. This could be hard on your hopes. This can be hard in your dearest friends and family and team, a company, a brand, a nation. It would be easy to give up. But as all of us out here in this bigger universe, of which you are not the center, you are not the center, but know you are definitively, deeply welcome. All of us out here in this universe want to gently remind you, you have one of the most beautiful planets, and it can still be saved. You belong to a gorgeously designed, intricate ecosystem of nature and plants and animals, and you need only to step outside of this room, your room, to bear witness to that. Now, we hear you've been tuning your ears ears to be able to listen to other animals and species on your planet. Okay, it has taken you a while, but you will soon be on the conversation that has been going on for tens of millions of years. And that conversation is that the universe loves you. And that's why you were born into this planet, glorious and ready to learn, humble, without pretense or hate. Do you remember that purity of your entrance? You were born into this gift of possibility, this gift of miracle, the miracle that made this universe, that made the planet we are on, that made you. And we want to remind you, you have a deep moral imagination, an imagination that can take many things and make them more beautiful, more fair, more open to all, more trusted, more verdant. An entire planet can flourish. Now, just in my close, just in our close, all of us on the universe want to remind you, you are the only species that has poets. Heed your poets. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? Or if we in the universe might suggest, what will you do with your one wild and precious species? When you make that choice, please know we are on your side. We have been here all along. We're not angry with you. We've been waiting all these millions of years for you to join the conversation so that something truly miraculous could unfold. Love us. If indeed that's the letter to us from the universe. Last night when we were in this salon, Diane said something really, really quite beautiful. She said, my definition of an artist is to honor life fully. And if you think about what Diane taught us last night, maybe what the universe is asking us to think about is this notion that maybe we're all artists. And what do we mean by artists? We are born into these vessels, these bodies, this sensing mechanism where we take in every beautiful, gorgeous detail of life, and this magical brain helps us take out the meaning of that. And this cycle of taking things in and being able to express outward what matters, what's meaningful to us, that gesture is what makes us alive. Because we are all artists, because every life is a creative act. In that sense, creativity is our birthright. It comes by being born. You may or may not love the term artist. That is not really my point. It's that we must lean into our humanity of how we came onto this planet. So how do you do that? I want to have you again close your eyes and think about a time in your early childhood where you remember the first time of being playful or creative or imagining something. building a fort, going on an adventure, going in nature, writing something down, creating something, painting something, playing sports, a moment you felt alive and mischievous and connected to the universe. Think about that for a moment. I just want you to let that sink in. On your chairs in the room and in your link at home is a way to dissect later that story. Who was there? Who witnessed you? Where did the joy come from? What did you do with that sense of rebellion? And how did that shape who you have ultimately become? Because almost every one of us can find that magical moment. Almost every one of us can find that dear part that makes us human. And then we become something else in our lives. You know, we become city planner, or CEO, or CFO, or activist, or designer, or fashion house runner. But if you try on CEO, artist, city planner, artist, activist, artist, where does that take you? It combines that very first moment of your life with whatever you have chosen to do as a profession. Sit in the invitation of that universe for a minute. What would you be if you took whatever you are and you put artist after, to be fully human, to do this gesture of taking in the world and putting back out into the world something that matters? Most of us, I think, wherever we came from that childhood moment, have done a lot of harm to our possibility as humans. But what if? What if we just thought about life as a creative act? Now, some of us obviously get paid to live this way, and some of us are very fortunate and very lucky to have professions that do this. But what if we could all do this? What would that require? I think we have maybe a little bit under 9 minutes left with each other. Let's talk about a couple ways that we could do that. In order to live this way, in order to live up to Diane's mantra that we need to honor life fully, that means you get to answer the invitation, well, maybe I am an artist. I think my story, I was 3rd grade, and my teacher came in and she said, we're gonna do a competition, and I want you to draw something. I want you to draw something about your passions. And at that time, my passions were 2 things: horses and fashion. A little bit revealing. Trailer of something to come. This is a simulation of what I drew because I didn't actually save that drawing. But it was a horse in plaid pants. And I remember going up to my teacher and saying, well, here's what I've drawn. And she says, but horses don't have pants. Horses don't have plaid pants. No, you can't enter that. I was like, well, if you wanted a photograph, you should have asked. This is what I'm passionate about. I used a lot of color. This is what I think it's right. I turned it in. Ultimately, I have no idea who judged it, but actually, I won the competition. Because we all know horses have plaid pants. My point being, I've been able to stay in that artist for a lot of my life because in that moment, as a gay kid, as an Asian kid, as a kid who did not fit in, that label of like, you're creative was my lifeline to be able to live. It's your lifeline too, in some way. I think the second thing, if we really want to accept this invitation from the universe, we need to learn how to breathe in art and exhale hope. I look at the work of Michael Murphy, architect, artist. By the way, he's actually a little bit uncomfortable with the comma artist part. I'm the one who's like, oh, maybe just add a comma artist. If you've been to the National Memorial, the Lynching Memorial in the United States, it honors all the lives that were lost through hanging in the United States. Every one of these pillars is a county in the United States. And every hanged person that there is a record of, and we don't actually as a country keep records of all, that tells you how shaming this is as an act of violence. When you walk through this museum and you see each county and you see each name, it moves you to a depth of how could we possibly do this to each other as human beings. But then if you walk to his next project with Hank Willis, The Embrace, MLK's profound embrace, you realize if you inhale this art, you ultimately exhale hope. Because that's what art does. That's what art lets us do as human beings. Now, this may sound grandiose, and this may sound really big, and often we have this perception that the art is only for the very rich or for very small children. And what I'm learning is yes, the rich are quite lovely in art, and children actually are the only ones of us who have a fun time. But for the rest of us, it's about trying to get in a daily dose of art. There's lots of neuroscience that says now even just 15 minutes of art witnessing or art making greatly brings down your cortisol levels, greatly puts your nervous system into a place it can be creative. But there's also just the joy of it. Dub, my co-accomplice here, where we did last night's salon, we're participating in this group right now, and contact me if you want to join it, where you get a little prompt each morning, which is just a little dose of art in some way. And, prompt number 3, it came sometime last week, was make something new, funny, or weird with objects around your desk. And it was one of those days I was super, super, super busy. One of those days that you're just, really hyper scheduled. I was staying in New York. So I reached into the nightstand at the hotel, got the little scribble pad of paper, and sketched this thing. And one of the things that this daily dose of art they ask you to do, and I think it's so valuable, is what was your mood before you did the art? And what is your mood now after you've done the art? Can you see that over there, people? Just lean back, can you see it? Before I think was really sleepy, but after I was bemused. And what we know about the neuroscience, for some of us who really want to tap into that creativity all the time, it's like when you are under stress, you only have access to half your capacities as a human being. If you want the rest of the capacities of your most creative, imaginative self, you have to be bemused. That's what your daily dose of art is about. My dad, we grew up super poor. We're Japanese American, which means in the United States during World War II, we were pretty persecuted as a people. And almost all my people were sent to internment camps. And so that's how my dad grew up. And the thing that I always remarked about my dad is how much fierce optimism he had, even though our peoples had been cordoned off and told that we were others. And my dad gave me a gift when I was 12, a Polaroid camera, which at the time was a big gob of money for us. And he entrusted this camera to me, and he said, take photos everywhere. Take photos, this is yours. Treat it well, but most important, use it. And so I started going around, maybe people in this room, like, and I was that kid who was doing that all the time. Tim, you remember this is okay. That's about noticing you're noticing, because when you develop that at age 12, you start to notice everything. What is that flower that's making its way through the crack in the sidewalk? Why are those people acting that way? What is the beautiful moment here? What does nature give us? What is this tree trying to tell me? Our ability to notice our noticing is vital. Now, as we get older, of course, we develop this default network in our brains. We start to see the world as so familiar, we start editing things out. We just don't even notice. So if we want to be creative beings, if we want to live up to honor life fully, then we have to notice our noticing. What are we leaving out? What are we overlooking? What are we not paying attention to? Because something, somewhere in that evidence is the beauty of the glorious life we can create. I think if you do this right, this notice you're noticing right, it gives you permission to make the world your studio. Oh, look back. When I say make the world your studio, it starts super simple. Like, this is my obsessive compulsive pen. Do you have any people have this particular pen? It's a Japanese pen. It's just that like thing that kind of, it's a glorified version of that Bic pen. It has red, yellow, green, pencil. Okay, why does it matter? Well, you can't actually make a studio if you don't have your tools with you. That means I carry my journal everywhere. Many of you do too, but maybe you don't do as I do, where I rip out pages of poetry and I hide it in my journal before the start of the week, so that as I get to that really boring, crappy, confrontational meeting, do you know that meeting? That's where the poetry will revisit me. And we think of our brains as this capacity where you have to woo it into going beyond your default network, that means you carry around incense that you can light anywhere, so that you put your body back in a place you're like, I want to be here, versus why the fuck am I in this room? Excuse me, might have to beep that out. Let's see what else is in the bag. I create green tea, kettle. I don't know if you're a kettle fan. This is not a product placement. Modern day Polaroid, everywhere. My point is not that any of these idiosyncratic things need to be what you do in your creative practice. My point is every human deserves a creative practice. This is a room that you have really fine-tuned creative practices. It becomes our responsibility to share that, to help each person answer for themselves the question of what it means to honor life fully. Because once you have this bag, once you have your pen, and once you have your poetry, whatever those versions are for you, it gives yourself permission to go around the world in a different way. I have a client I work with that she starts every single meeting with a poem. And at first I was like, I do not have time for this. I mean, I'm the guy telling you to be creative, and I'm like, we need to make a decision here. But goodness bless Rachel, because she has taught me, when you have 30 meetings in a month, poetry is our language by which we understand the non-understandable for us. And when you get 30 chances to do that together with your colleagues, by the end of the month, you are much better living in the uncertainty and ambiguity of what life is today. Okay, I'm come to the end of my time. I just want to reread you this letter that the universe sent me and room service delivered this morning, because just this last part of the letter, will you close your eyes one more time? Wrinkle, wrinkle, scruffle, scruffle. The microphone people are hating me. Heed your poets. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? What will you do with your one wild and precious species? This is the universe talking, remember? When you make that choice, please know we are on your side. We have been here all along. We are not angry with you. We have been waiting all these millions of years for you to join the conversation so that something truly miraculous will unfold. This era. Something miraculous. Do you want it as much as I do? Thank you.
I swear to God, I did not know Keith was going to ask that question. Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. But 21 years ago, I was asked that question as part of a project, something called the Portrait Project at Harvard Business School. So I just went to look up what I wrote, and I really want to read it. Because that's like, this is kind of magic. I don't try to fit in anymore. I've always felt a little different from people around me. A bit shorter. Okay, a lot shorter. Not so good at ice hockey like every other Canadian kid, but not really that interested in playing either. And a family history spanning 3 very different continents, making it hard to answer the perennial question, where are you from? These differences made me uncomfortable when I was young. I wanted so much to blend in and make up for what some tried to make me think were deficiencies. But my parents helped me to discover that my differences were actually a source of strength. From playing a burdensome accordion to taking modern art classes to ripping up the soccer field, they exposed me to everything so I could discover my own talents, find out what made me unique, and be proud of it. Well, it turned out that accordion really wasn't up my alley. I still discovered my love for the stage and passion for music. I learned to celebrate my differences and those of others. I know now that my differences help me to see the world from a new perspective and help me to appreciate things others might not see. So, I just want to be me. I want to make the world a place where diversity is celebrated and where what stands out is more important than what fits in. So thank you for reminding me of that, Keith. That was my purpose that I wrote 21 years ago, and I feel like that's what this event is really about. Joni Mitchell once said, I heard someone from the music business saying they are no longer looking for talent. They want people with a certain look and a willingness to cooperate is what is necessary to be an artist, not for perverse reasons, but to protect your vision. The considerations of a corporation, especially now, have nothing to do with art or music. It's an interesting statement. Our next speakers are no stranger to this tension, but they have managed to find a balance between commercial success and creative fulfillment. They're here to share how they achieve that balance. Dan Levy is the Emmy Award-winning mastermind behind Schitt's Creek, the sitcom that he starred in alongside his father, Eugene Levy, and which went from small-time Canadian show to big-time global sensation during the pandemic, fueled by the power and reach of Netflix. How many people watched Schitt's Creek? Yeah. People are already laughing, Dan. You haven't even gotten on stage. And this is Jonathan Anderson's second appearance at Voices. His idiosyncratic, refreshingly original designs for LVMH owned Spanish house Loewe, as well as his own brand, J.W. Anderson, continue to earn him both critical acclaim and commercial success. Please join me in welcoming Dan Levy and Jonathan Anderson to the Voices stage in conversation with BOF's Tim Blanks. Welcome.
Oh,
Water.
oh, great. Hi, everybody.
It exists. Welcome, Dan. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hi.
What do we think of Joni's words?
Listen, she tells it like it is.
Love Joni.
Considerations of a corporation having nothing to do with the artist's output. What do we think about that? You both exist in the belly of the beast. Netflix, LVMH.
You go first, Dan.
Well, it's tough because I currently work for Netflix, so that's a full circle moment because they had passed on shits. In fact, all of America, all of the American network streaming services, cable networks passed on Schitt's Creek. And we still believed in it. We took it up to Canada, made it with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, funded it ourselves, pieced all the financing together, found a very teeny tiny American network called Pop Network, which was at the time the former TV Guide network. So it was just actually just a place where you would go to look at what else was on TV. They didn't tell us at the time that most of their sort of outlets were standard definition. We weren't even in high definition. And I think the show started in like 2016. There was simply no excuse for it.
It was in color, though.
It was in color, fortunately. We could barely afford to make it in color, but anyway. So, in a way, I live in this strange place where we went and made something with absolutely no outside opinions, and because the stakes were so low, we were able to really kind of make the show for ourselves. We were lucky enough to be in a situation where CBC in Canada and Pop in the US needed us, which, you know, was important, but they never really interfered. And so what we made was quite pure. It was fun, it was specific, it was collaborative, it was all of our actors feeling the freedom to help and to shape their characters in ways they might not have if this were done any other way. It did not have test audiences. It had no barometer for success, and yet it succeeded. And so for me, to be in the system now, by way of a show that succeeded despite the system, is an interesting place to be. And I think it's afforded me a level of freedom that I might not have gotten had I done it a different way. But yeah, and I think on the one hand, yeah, it's tough because huge corporations have so many needs. And how can you impose all of those needs onto a creative idea and expect it to shine?
Do you recognize this experience, Jonathan?
Yeah. You know, I think anyone who works for a corporation, it's it's a thing. You know, I always think that sometimes I feel like, you know, I work for LVMH, which is Words ultimately, which is run by a very smart man, and I think it's more about the people's influence or idea of a corporation is what makes a corporation somehow. Does that make sense? I don't know how to put it, but it's sort of like, it's not the man at the top, it is everyone's fear of what they want from it that ultimately sanitizes it somehow.
But do you think, I think there's something,
I'm trying to choose my words.
I'll save you.
No. But I think it's important. I think sometimes, you know, when you talk about corporations, this idea of the designer and the corporation notoriously is seen as this idea of pressure and this idea of commercial success and you know, designers have become footballers nearly somehow. But I actually, for me, it's sort of, I feel like my approach to the corporation is more kind of, I put the pressure on, not the corporation, because ultimately I want to be able to work I want to be able to work creatively within the corporate structure. Does that make sense?
But do you think that's because your success is persuasive in this context, that your success speaks to the corporation? I'm wondering for both of you, I feel that you blossomed during the pandemic, during an extraordinary situation where all bets were off. So you got a global television audience, a kind of captive audience, and you brought Levy into people's consciousness in a different way. You were able to bring Levy into people's minds in a very different way from the standard catwalk, catwalk coverage way. You activated Levy in a completely new way. And so it was a moment, a rare moment, where the outsider's sensibility was allowed to move inside. And I come back to my favorite analogy, which is the Trojan horse, that you were able to shunt your perverse outsider sensibilities into the mainstream because of this extraordinary circumstance that existed in the world. What do you think of that premise?
You're not wrong, I guess. Yeah, I mean, we had no expectation for the show, and yet people found it, and I think they found it because it was kind of perverse and weird, and at first it was this culty thing that people, I think, took some pride in having found, and then it became what it was, and it became what it was because of Netflix. And now working with Netflix, and I have made a film with them now, and they were incredibly supportive through that entire creative process. Granted, I was very clear about the boundaries that I'm setting for myself in terms of preserving the actual idea. So I think a lot of it too is where you're willing to draw the line in preserving what it is you want to make. And I've come to realize that I think some people, I'm an incredibly fearful person just generally in life, but when it comes to work, I'm not. And I have no problem saying to someone, well, if we can't do it this way, then we won't do it. And we'll find another way, we'll find another idea to do. And that, I think, scares people because they're used to people being indebted to the process instead of owning their own work and saying, okay, well, if this doesn't work, then let's not do it.
Is that as fundamental as the old creative integrity versus commercial success debate?
I guess. I mean, it is predicated on privilege, too. I have the ability to do that. I don't want to leave out the conversation where a lot of people in more vulnerable positions have to take the job. They have to accommodate the idea to make sure that it fits. Or, I mean, I guess in life they technically don't, but in a lot of business senses, if you want the paycheck, you have to bend. So the idea of privilege does enter into the equation. I am at a point in my life where I don't need to do anything I don't want to do. What I have found quite exciting in the challenge is saying, okay, I know that you need this little movie that I've made that's a drama and everyone knows me from comedy. I know that you need this to kind of have mass appeal. You're a business, I get it. So the challenge for me is, how do we meet halfway in the marketing of it, in the way that it looks to people, and in the outward-facing campaign of it? Because if certain people had their way, it would be promoted as a rom-com, because that's the easiest way to get people in. And yet, it's not. So I still have to preserve the idea of the movie. I have to preserve the experience so that people aren't getting a completely different, the door is letting them into a different room, so to speak. And yet, it's been a fun challenge, because I think where we've landed in the marketing of it, in the promotion of it, has actually informed me in terms of, okay, there is a way that creativity and the kind of larger goals of a business can come together.
Now, this film is good grief.
Yeah.
And do you feel that it is, you say the drama and the rom-com, there's a drama and rom-com debate there.
I think from a promotional standpoint,
they would like it to be rom-com for promotion. Yeah,
well, I think they, bright and happy. It's about grief.
No, I'm wondering. I'm wondering. What did you say there?
It's about grief.
It's about grief. Well,
I understand it's a tough sell.
Yeah.
You need.
Grief is a pretty major sell, I would say, at the moment. And black comedy seems to be a fairly logical response to the way the world is. But I'm wondering for Jonathan, the notion of the cult that becomes a mainstream success, the cult of J.W. Anderson becoming this. I mean, Loewe is now widely touted as one of the most successful brands in the whole industry. How you face that notion of expectation, that massaging expectation, preserving your own sense of what you do, when there is this whole other growing notion that's swirling around you that is happening with Dan as well.
I kind of enjoy it, weirdly, because when I started at Loewe, it was tiny. It was a very, very, very small brand. I think people may not realize how small it was, and it was very tough in the beginning because you would see all these brands doing like billboards, and you couldn't do billboards because there was no budget to do billboards. Now I quite enjoy being able to. I enjoy succumbing to it somehow because it's sort of I use the same creative approach to it, but on a bigger window ultimately. So, like we had Maggie Smith recently in a campaign.
Heaven.
And I remember
Heaven.
And I remember being in that meeting, and being, maybe as the brand was getting a lot bigger and media spend is bigger, there was a little bit of confusion in the marketing department of like, where should we still be doing images like this? Celebrities don't like their pictures being taken in this way. And I was very determined that this had to go out. And then you trust your logic on it. Even though the window is bigger, you kind of morph. I feel like that's the geniusness of Loewe somehow, is that it is a shapeshifter. It is not a continual aesthetic. You're morphing as the brand grows. It's nearly like character building. You start off at one thing and then you become a different person.
Well, you've definitely created the feeling that anything is possible at Loewe.
Yeah.
You really don't know what is coming next.
But it was like the pandemic. I will never forget the arguments that were being had behind the scenes of, as I was sitting in my house, like in despair with gin and tonic. Like it was like, I'm wondering, and that was like what to do. And I work better in that way. I work better when there is no option, So for me, my whole thing during that moment was to kind of be like, well, if I'm gonna still have a job at the end of this pandemic, I'm gonna need to like change. I'm gonna need to do something because I'm bored. Maybe everything was boring and that's why we're all here. So then I had to reinvent everything. Like I had to reinvent myself somehow because I had to kind of nearly let go of the idea of myself and sort of say, well, I have no choice. We're gonna do a show in a box. I need to be creative. And it was, in a weird way, it was like really easy pickings because no one was doing anything. Like everyone was like, how do we do a show? And then they would like fly people and everyone was in masks. And I was like, this is just uncomfortable. You know what I mean? It was this moment where I was like, well, how do we just get it into people's, like, it was like nearly like mail or order catalogs. I was like, I'm gonna just like bombard you with like fan mail. I'm just gonna send you as much as I can.
But then do you think both of you then kind of got the luxury of doing it your way, in a sense? That's a success at that time. You both now, in your environments, have the luxury of doing what you want to do. How much of a weight is that, though?
I don't think it's a weight. I see it as the greatest gift in a way. Because when you go out on a limb and it succeeds, you'll never not have that. And so, I don't want to speak for Jonathan, but when you walk into a room and you have a conversation with someone who's trying to disprove something that you yourself have proven, it's a lot easier to say, well, I don't know, it worked. It worked. Not having a test audience worked. not having to filter something through a million people, it worked. It found a way. That's not to say that failure doesn't happen. That's not to say that you won't have highs and lows. Yeah. But for me, it was always about preserving the integrity of the idea, making sure that you fight for the integrity of the idea from the beginning to the end. Because as the person who's creating it, you're the one that has to sleep at night. And I always feel that's the one thing I protect the most is in a way my own head. Because when I go to sleep, I can't think of something more heartbreaking than starting with an idea that I loved, allowing people to change it to the point where it loses its DNA. Then it goes out into the world and either succeeds or fails. And I have to look at that and say, well, that's not me. You can never get that back. So the fight to protect that, I think, is so important. And I only think that the success, having sort of gone around the system and proven it wrong, only sort of is like ammunition to keep going.
But you never reach a point, though, where you say, oh, God, can I do it again? Does it ever become that kind of pressure? You said something when we were talking before about this, which was super smart. The notion that brilliance can be boring. If you're good over and over and over again, people are like, oh, here he is again with something brilliant.
Yeah, and then they dismiss it. Then they dismiss it over and again. I felt like you can't be trapped by that. You brought up Bowie. I think you can be consistently major, and then people kind of, it becomes like norm. So then they're kind of like, oh, but she's always going to do something major, so that's really boring. It's sort of...
Have you had a taste of that yet?
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like at the beginning part of Levy, I felt like I was screaming in a vacuum. I would go into like board meetings, I would be like, but this is major. Like, we have Stephen Meisel giving his archive. This is like insane. And it was kind of, it wasn't part of a formula. I think this is what I love about the pandemic. It destroyed every formula that there ever was. Because you had the biggest business people in the world turning up to their desk, and every store in the world was shut. There was no money. It was insane. Like, you couldn't even get in to buy the bag because the doors were closed. Do you know what I mean? Countries were like locked down.
You know what it also did though? It gave the consumer or the audience the freedom to find what they liked.
Yeah.
And I think so often we're guided down these paths, especially like movie studios, the big movie studios pick far in advance the movies they think are going to succeed. And that's where the money goes. And then the smaller movies, the other movies kind of slip through the cracks. The pandemic...
That was the same in fashion.
...forced people to figure out what they actually like.
And then does it leave you in this position of influence in a way? And how does that feel? Does that become like a sort of stress? Like, we didn't plan for this, and now we're here, and look what's happening. We're huge.
The weirdest part of it was going into the pandemic, being able to kind of walk down the street and have a life, and then 2 years pass, and then you walk out of your home, and everyone knows who you are. It shouldn't work like that. I feel like you should want that in a way. Like, I think people who have notoriety kind of pursue it. Our cast of our show, we didn't pursue it. We didn't even know it was happening until we walked outside, and the world was completely different. I'm grateful for it. It's afforded me a lot of opportunity. I got to meet Jonathan in the process of the pandemic. But yeah, it was this. Yeah, it's a very strange thing. I don't feel pressure by it, but I actually feel very inspired by it.
So what's next?
Well, I have a movie that I made that's coming out on January 5th. And it was a huge departure. Again, I think we're talking about keeping things interesting. Entertainment has this unbelievable capacity to kind of be like, oh, you did something funny? You're a comic forever. Yeah. And I never wanted to be that. We had always, in the writer's room, had always seen Schitt's Creek as a drama.
That's what I mean about the tyranny of expectation.
Yeah, so for me, drama was what we were writing. It just happened to be funny. In this case, I just wanted to continue to tell a dramatic story that wasn't quite as funny. Moments of lightness, sure, but the idea that I felt compelled or pushed to go to make another Schitt's Creek was so uninteresting to me. And I absolutely will return to comedy in a larger sense, but this was what was interesting to me. This is what was going to keep me excited. And so I did it. And I was very fortunate that Netflix understood that desire and backed it.
And Good Grief is intensely personal. That's how it felt to me, anyway.
Yeah.
You've managed to make Levy a super personal thing as well. Maggie Smith is in the ads, and all the other cast of thousands who show up in your ads. A kind of perverse
Mix.
choice. How do you feel about what do you see as next for you when you're able to do anything?
It is very difficult. Like with Levy, I feel, I don't own Levy, but I feel like I own it. Like, which is probably a bad thing. But you give everything, ultimately. You have to. I think for something to be successful, you have to give everything you have. Mm-hmm. Because if you kind of go into this sort of thing, well, I'm going to give this little bit to them, but not this, you end up with this half-cooked thing. And I don't know, I feel, what do I do next? I want Levy to continue growing. I think I have financial goals for Levy. I would like to be able to say, well, we were here, no one saw us coming, and this happened. It is better to be
20 billion Levy.
Do you know what I mean? I do feel we could be, maybe I'm a dreamer, but I do feel like we're entering a period within luxury that is a very different period now. I think it is about product. If you cannot, I think it's about control and product. I think this is what people haven't realized, is that if you do not decide the doorknob, how do you sell the bag? Do you know what I mean? Because ultimately you've got to sell the journey. And why? Why did I choose that doorknob? Why did we choose this bag? Why do we choose the casting? And I think people are scared of control. Big corporations are scared of control. And I think...
Or of ceding control to somebody like you.
Or to anyone. Because there has never been a history of the logic of that. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's why I think me and Dan get on. Because, you know, for me, I like Dan because it's 360. I think 360. I want my team to think 360 on what we're putting out there. And sometimes you have to make the decision that you may have to give the audience what they don't want to annoy them. Because there's nothing better when people are annoyed, because then they think. And I always think that when I'm doing a collection, how do you kind of go off the path that you're on? You know, it was like I was in a kind of orgy of surrealism at one point. It was ridiculous. You know, we had cars.
Loved it.
It was a great moment. It was great. But then it was quite nice to then suddenly be like, we are not going to do that, and we are going to just be about a one silhouette show. You know, because ultimately you are changing up the chapter of the book. You know, because I think the minute you fall into a formula, and I think we've seen this in brands, the minute a brand becomes formulaic, the clock starts ticking. And this is, I think, in everything. It's like TV series, it's like, it's like The Crown.
The clock is really ticking, and it's ticked way over time here. And you were talking about annoying the audience, so I'm going to annoy the audience by saying that's all the time we've got.
Oh, no.
Look at that big, We could really talk for another 45 minutes as we have. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Saudi Arabia is poised to become the fastest growing economy in 2022, outpacing Asian giants like China, India, South Korea and other European nations as well.
Cristiano Ronaldo believes the Saudi Pro League will become one of the most important in the world. His former Real Madrid teammate, Karim Benzema, has arrived in Jeddah after signing for Saudi Arabia's Al Ittihad.
Saudi Arabia did the unexpected this weekend. It threw a giant rave party, a 4-day electronic music festival complete with psychedelic lights and international DJs. The images that you see, They're from Saudi Arabia. This giant rave party was held in the deserts of Riyadh with the blessings and money of the Saudi royal family. That's the House of Saud.
Saudi Arabian women will officially be able to drive with a license on Sunday. The ban on women being able to drive by themselves was lifted last September. Now women will be able to get their license and drive a car without supervision.
So as you can see, Saudi Arabia, which has been all over the media over the past year, is a country undergoing a transformation. But the media narratives we hear in the West and the media narratives perhaps told in Saudi Arabia, very different. Our next speakers are here to demystify Saudi Arabia's cultural landscape through the art that they create. Abdulnasser Gharem was a lieutenant colonel in the Saudi Arabian army, who in 2003 co-founded the non-profit platform Edge of Arabia to facilitate cultural exchange between the Middle East and the Western world. He is considered the pioneer of contemporary art in Saudi Arabia, and his work is displayed in museums including the V&A, the British Museum, and LACMA. Halla Bint Khalid is a Saudi artist and author whose work is playful, surreal, and often explores subversive topics like feminism, motherhood, and gender equality in the context of Saudi society. Please welcome Halla Bint Khalid and Abdulnasser Gharem in conversation with my friend, Dr. Ahmed Zaidi.
Thank you, Imran.
Wow, what an introduction. Because things you saw on the screen, as you can probably imagine, are quite difficult topics to navigate. And I think we're living in a world where sometimes nuance is missing. You know, a lot of our perceptions of Saudi Arabia are informed by either the Western media or perhaps some of the PR that trickles through the kingdom's institutions. And I think in the midst of all that, the voices and the views of the Saudi people are lost. And today, I want to dissect a little bit of that. I want to uncover a little bit of that. And for you to fully understand that, we have to go back. We have to understand where Saudi Arabia was. Where is it now? And what does the future look like? And I think I lived in Saudi Arabia for 18 years. I'm not Saudi, I'm Pakistani. Unlike the other distinguished Pakistani artists, activists, and directors, I'm just a mere engineer. But in the context of everything, the thing that baffled me the most is I never understood how Abdulnasser kept his thobe so well ironed. But I think in that context, Abdulnasser, I want to start with you. The title of today's talk is Smart Obedience. What does that mean?
Well, I will try to explain it through a personal story. As an artist, the first day for me when I remember that when I was 6 years old and we went to the school, the teacher started to tell us or to teach us to practice the execution of each image in the book. So when there is a, what it called, creature, we need to put a line across his head. And I was wondering as a kid, why we are doing this? And I think the first question came to my mind, why the government is printing these books? And the teachers are telling us to execute that images. So, when I went home, I asked my dad, my mom, they just listen to what the teachers are telling you. So from that time, I found out that there is no options in the Arab world. You have only two options, to obey or to pretend that you are obeying. So that's where the smart obedience came from.
Tell us a little bit about how you pretend to obey.
Well, again, it's really very tough to pretend to obey, but I will tell you what. My dad was insisting that I'm gonna be a good artist and amazing artist, so you need to go to the art college. But I told him, being in the artist, I'm from the southern region of Saudi Arabia. being an artist at that time, it's like a moral scandal. So why would I do that? So I went to the army, and the first lesson we learn in the army is the camouflage, which is amazing. That's me, exactly. I was hiding in the army, and I was practicing my art without, that's why no one is annoying me, because I am in the army. If anyone asks me, I'm a soldier, I'm not an artist. So that's how I, navigate my path through my daily life.
But I think all of us, we grew up in an environment in Saudi where we were practicing this form of smart obedience. But then something happened, I think, for all of us, for everyone in this room probably, that changed our lives forever. 9/11 happened. What did that mean for you? Well, the best of the smart obedience based on no one can, that's what I realized when I was a kid. No one can stop you from thinking in private. That's the thing you have, and you need to keep doing that. So I did this artwork. I moved to the contemporary artwork because I found out that's the best medium where you can deliver your message through coding. So 2 of my friends, they were with me in the high school for 3 years. We were like the best friends. And they disappeared for like 6 months, and we were kids, and we were asking, so there was a rumor that they moved to another city, so we said, okay, we forgot about them. And suddenly I found my friends in the news, they were 2 of the hijackers on 9/11. So at that time, really, I start to feel that I can't rely on where I belong or what I belong to. So from that time, I don't know if you remember the first piece, it was The Path. I was looking for my own path, and I said, I will never listen to these people. I need to create my own path. I need to create my life. And that's, I think, the one of the, and also using the contemporary art by decoding all of your messages. And at that time, nobody knows about what is the contemporary art. Of course, at that time, I was looking for the people who's intellectual. It's like epistemic visual artist.
Visual art, visual viewer. Sorry, epistemic visual viewer. I'm so sorry, my English is not good as Ahmed or Halla, so forgive me for that.
I think, Halla, I want to move to you. And before we get to the picture, I want you to tell us a little bit about you growing up as a woman, or as a young woman back then in Saudi.
Well, I'll tell you what it started off as a child. The world felt like I was Alice in Wonderland, and I fell through the rabbit hole, and everyone was mad. Most people were not altogether there, erratic. And the Queen of Hearts, I had to visit her every Wednesday afternoon. So I realized that I would have to pretend to be in the picture like everyone else was, but I had to trust my own sensibility and follow my own inner voice through everything, and not follow the collective illusions and the limiting stories that surrounded me. So I managed to do that through art.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the painting behind us?
Well, this is, I heard so many of your speakers, the speakers here mentioned their fathers, but fathers in Saudi Arabia in particular, for a girl, if your father doesn't support you, your game is over. And I was very lucky that I have an extraordinarily supportive father. And he has empowered me in so many ways. This is a physical way that he actually empowered me when it was the Iraq-Kuwait war. we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know where the danger was actually going to come from, if it was going to be from outside the country or actually internal. So we were given gas masks that we didn't know how to use or when to use them. My son, who tells me now that, Mama, if you actually used it, you would have died, because I didn't know that there was this thing that you were supposed to click off if there was actually a gas attack. So I wore this gas mask for a month, not knowing how to use it. But the most unusual thing is that my father gave me a gun. And
You can see it in the next slide.
yes. And it was loaded. And I didn't know how to use it. But we didn't know where the danger was coming from. And all my uncles were asking him what on earth he was doing, giving a girl a gun. And I named it Halla's Got a Gun.
Amazing. I think we talked a little bit about smart obedience, how both of your lives were, as you mentioned, filled with thoughts, but pretending to obey.
Yeah.
But then at one point, you realized that you needed to find a way to communicate your thoughts while still pretending to obey. And you did this piece.
Yeah, this piece called Message/Messenger, and it's, I mean, the core of that is the Dome of the Rock. And since I was a kid, they used that issue to fill, to feed me with hate and anger against, like, people who I didn't even know. Like, you need to hate the Jewish, you need to hate the Christian, you need to hate. Since I was a kid, that's what we get through our education and through, the mosque and the school. And I was wondering why I'm full of hate. And I start to, do my own research, and I found out, I was wondering, is that hate came genetically, or is it a cultural product? So reading Freud just explained that to me, and I was so released when I okay, it's a cultural product. So I start to feel I'm good, I'm healthy, I'm okay. So it's not something inside my genes, so I can't change it. So at that time, I did that piece, which represent what's happening in the whole region, in the whole Middle East, and how did they use a lot of people use this issue to recruit us against people who we didn't even know. So really, when I did this piece, it's like a trap, as you can see. I just, if anyone will pull the rope, everything is gonna fall down, and it's glory where the trap need to be. It need to be glossy and glory, so to attract the people to see to catch the piece or whatever it is. And my life was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be safe or not, because all of the Muslim world might hate me. So I put this piece in an auction house, in a charity, because at that time I was looking for money to fund the young artists or to do a kind of education program. And on the other hand, I was afraid if the people will hate me, all of the people is gonna hate me. So what happened in that auction house? The price went so crazy, and it reached like $842,000 for like a kid coming to the auction house. And as a country, we have no record in the auction houses or the contemporary world. So the people immediately went to the price and forget about the artwork and what I was. So that's what saved me. And we took all of that money, and I did like 5 years program for each year, like 14 kids. I take them to London. It's simple. The program is simple. Just go to the museums, do studio visits, go to the libraries, check yourself, see your engagement with the things, and it works.
So ultimately, even though there's a provocative message that religion is a trap,
yeah,
the fact that it was a world record price for Saudis saved you in a way.
Exactly.
What did you do with that money?
Yeah, I would just say it. I told you I was hoping to do like an education program for the young artists in Saudi Arabia.
And you often describe what you use with that money to create Gharem Studio, which you are both partners in.
Yeah.
Which you describe as the invisible island.
Yeah.
Why do you describe it as the invisible island?
Because I was feeling that I was, swimming against the current. So I was wondering, am I gonna stay all of my life swimming against the current? So I need to create some invisible island that no one is gonna see it, except the people who have invisible idea. So immediately they will see that island. And, I was gambling in that. And immediately it happens. Well, since I built the studio, in the beginning, I thought it's going to be my own studio. And the next day, I was surrounded by young, talented boys and girls from all over the city.
And Halla, how did you come to be part of that studio?
You want the full story? Well, am I allowed to say? Well, I was told that I got to meet the rock star artist.
Oh, the rock star.
You are. Rolling Stone says you are. I didn't say it. So, and I was told that I'm supposed to come and meet him, and I walked in, and there is an invisible sign on the door, and it says, you can smoke your accidental privileges outside. And this is the only time I ever saw this in my country. Your accidental privileges are the first things they want to know about. And that's how they value you. And in his studio, there are standards. You either meet the standards or you can leave. And that impressed me because that was very courageous and very different to everything I'd ever seen before in the country. The second reason was that he used the two keys my father likes best, which is giving for the sole purpose of giving, without any other hidden agendas. And the second key was education, because that is the key to growth. So, and then the other reason is that I finally found a way to push the boundaries. He showed me how I could push the boundaries elegantly, without, being aggressive or without being ugly. So I had to be part of this project.
And what are we looking at behind us?
It's very confusing because my editor was saying you shouldn't show the gun because that'll be offensive. And I was telling her, well, if I showed this, it'll be offensive to the other half of the world. This is a project that I did, again, after walking into Gharem studio. And it's an expression of what makes me angry, which is how we use each other. We look at what we can get out of each other rather than look at the essence of the person we're meeting. And then most marriages, I think 90% of the marriages in my country are based on this. How can I use you? What can I get out of you? So it's a whole project titled A Wife Is, A Husband Is.
Sweet.
A wife is a punching bag.
This is my cabinet of disclosures. So it's all of the things that, yes.
Abdulnasser, I would love if you could explain your medium. We talked about smart obedience, but your medium are the rubber part of the stamp.
Yeah.
Why did you choose that?
Well, as I told you, the contemporary artist being a contemporary artist, that will give you the freedom to use any medium. And I was in the military, as I mentioned, for 23 years. And then I found out that my drawer are full of stamps. And I realized how powerful is this stamps. I mean, imagine if there is no stamps, we will not do anything. We're going to be stuck. So I said, okay, here is my medium. And then again, you know, when I create the studio, one of the things I teach the kids is that they need to know the difference between the freedom of thought and the freedom of expression. And they need to split it. In the Arab world, from my experience, it needs to be splitted. So it's simple. If you're gonna practice the freedom of expression, you can't tweet anything. You will be gone. But there will be a lot of consequences. But the freedom of thought, I mean, the freedom action happen in your mind, and that's what I want to change. I want a guy who can, you know, come up with a concept, come up with an idea, and he will have the full support. So I'll get back to what I use. I was, as I told you, I was trying to hide my messages, so that's medium, fit, because, you know, the repetition of the letters and numbers and symbols. You know, sometimes I forgot where did I put myself. I couldn't find it sometimes. And it helps me with the customs, because when you send it to the customs, they will look at it, it's like spill or something. What are they gonna do with that? And then when I hang it in the exhibition, I will start to highlight some text that I'm looking for.
I want you to tell us a little bit about Haytham.
Okay, so we brought some artists from our studio. So Haytham, he's one of, again, I'll get back to the studio. So Haytham came to us in the studio, and he said, I'm an artist. I said, can you show me your work? And he was like hesitating, and then I started to tell him, Haytham, this area is safe. You can tell whatever you want. And it's a space of disclosure. And you're gonna have, there is no prejudgment on you. You are not a victim, be careful of that. You are not a victim. You are not looking for your rights. You are just telling us your idea. So he started to reason, he started to show me his work. So he's studying these kinds of issue in our society, which is no one wants to talk about it. So,
tell us about what's on the website.
Yeah. So when I saw his work, I said, your work is amazing. Why didn't you go to the Ministry of Culture? And he suddenly told me, man, I can't show it to my dad. How much more? And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I was so excited about your work. So, okay, and now I understand. So I start to, he introduced me to like a huge slice of the society. So when we were Googling, we found out that tourism English website in Saudi Arabia, they said in English, we are welcoming the LGBTQ community. Then I Google in Arabic, there is nothing in Arabic. So it's like a silent sign that it's okay with the government. But the obstacle is, the culture has become an obstacle. So who's gonna lead in that? So I think the studio could, sometimes I turn my studio to accelerator to these kind of issue. So I support the guy, I try to make him like strong, have the knowledge, have the opportunity. I'll give him the connection. He traveled with me all over the world to show him what's the Documenta, what's the Binali. I think to me, to make him stronger it's better than going to his dad or mom and try to convince them that their kids is amazing.
Halla, I want you to quickly tell us about your storybooks.
Well,
children books.
Yes. Well, it's probably very usual in the West to have stories for children, but I think I can speak for the Arab world in general. Starting in Oman, across Saudi Arabia, North Africa, all the way to Morocco. There's usually just one bedtime story that's told to children. And that is that there is an ugly ogress who's going to come and eat you up if you don't go to bed now. So I just thought I would like to tell children a nicer story before bedtime and show them some nice pictures. And then I realized schools started inviting me to present my work to children. And I discovered a new possibility there, which is to hear children, to listen to children's thoughts and ideas and allow them to express themselves. And they're quite amazing. I'm just always amazed by what very small children can say and what they think. They are much smarter than any of us give them credit for. And I hope they're going to do a better job than we have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I want to leave you with one last story that the point that we really want you to take away today is that cultural change doesn't happen from the outside. It happens from the inside, and it doesn't happen from the governments. It happens from the people. And Abdulnasser and Halla are just examples of some of the people that are driving this change. We want to leave you with one final story of some of the success of this change. And Abdulnasser, perhaps you could tell us a story.
Yeah, before telling the story, remember what I told you when I was 6 years old? That environment was created like in 1744 until 2017. And then after that, there is a huge social reform in Saudi Arabia, and we need to admit it. And I'm not here to represent anyone. And I think I'm asking you to distinguish between the people and the government all over the world. The other thing I'm really asking is, you know, the West, I have a lot of friends, media and all of that, but their problem is they are asking us as a society to become a utopian society. But when I started to study the European societies, it took them ages, and they went through a lot of struggles until they reached that point of freedom and human rights. So stop asking us to be a utopian society, because we are in a phase now installing our tablet of even good. So that's why we need the solidarity of everybody. And again, we are here not the victims, and we are not asking for our rights. Last story. This is should I talk about Joyce, the artist?
Yeah.
So this is one of the studio artists, okay? So he did this artwork in 2013, and no one was caring about this work. And the artist asked me, I said, I don't know what to do with it. I mean, I'm not, I don't know, I'm not good in commercial. And in 2017, by mistake, the government printed that image.
Which is a picture of King Faisal with Yoda.
Can you go to the next slide? Is it? Yeah, there it is. So in 2017, by mistake, because the designer there was a subject about King Faisal. So the designer, he was Googling the best high-res images of King Faisal. So of course the artist image is the best because he did it properly. So they just put it in the book. And next morning we have a call from Shawish mom, because she's a teacher. And she said, what did you do? We said, what happened? They said, I mean, the picture of my son is in the what it called, the book, the Nationals?
It's the national curriculum of Saudi Arabia, the history books.
Can you believe it?
2 million.
2 million copy. So I was shocked that, okay. So I go back and we ask Shawish, can you call your mom to collect some copies for us? And he said, what are we gonna do with it? I said, this is gonna be the best. So like 2 hours, they pulled 2 million copies from all over the country. So I was like, I know, now they are coming for the studio, I'm sure, because we are the weakest, element in the story. So what I did, I said, okay, how can we protect ourselves and Shawish? So what I did, I called a friend of mine, he's in the New York Times, and I told him, bro, I have an amazing story for you. He said, come on. I said, it's so good, trust me. And he said, okay, give me the story. So I took a picture of the book, and I took the picture of the painting, and he just went so crazy. Abdulnasser, let me talk to the artist right now. So they print like a half page in the New York Times. And suddenly, like, people from Japan are calling the studio asking to do the interview with the artist, and from China because of Yoda and all of that thing. So Twitter went like for 2 weeks. All the parents are asking the Minister of Education. They just, dear Minister, who's this guy sitting next to King Faisal? And it went a hashtag for like 1 month. And Shawish became the hero, and they fired, sadly, the Minister of Education in Saudi Arabia.
Anyway,
it's a true story.
On that note, we sadly have run out of time. But thank you so much, guys.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody eats, regardless of your religion or political beliefs or your take on current events. Meals nurture communities and families. They bring together unlikely companions and pave the way for them to find common ground. This is the ethos at the heart of Our Place, co-founded by Shiza Shahid. Shiza is here to tell us how she maintained a sense of purpose when going from nonprofit to for-profit, and how Our Place navigates the deeply personal and culturally sensitive space that is food. First, just have a look at this video for a little bit on how Shiza got here.
Food is culture, it's identity, it's connection. I'm an immigrant, my partner's an immigrant. We literally found our place in America by cooking food and breaking bread together. We set out to build a brand which celebrates all our cultures loudly and proudly. We didn't expect what happened next.
The former CEO of the Malala Fund has embarked on a new path that is all about sharing a meal and the importance of community.
We're building the first brand in the kitchen rooted in culture, identity, and connection. Welcome to Our Place. We saved you a seat. My mother never taught me to cook. I never fried an egg growing up, never made a cup of soup. I could barely make toast. But unlike this awful haircut, the cooking thing was not entirely my mother's fault. Side note, that is not a photograph of me, that's a photo of my sister. I am the third kid, so they took no photos of me. My sister, of course, insists it has nothing to do with birth order. She was just a cuter kid, but I cannot blame my mother for not teaching me to cook because the truth is, my mother was just trying to set me free. My mother, Ammi, is beautiful. She is tough as nails and kinder than anyone you'll ever meet. She was born into a deeply patriarchal family and community in the city of Faisalabad, Pakistan, was raised with almost no freedom. She is the oldest of her parents' too many daughters, and was told from a young age that her only options in life were to marry a man she would not choose and to hope that he would be kind. Thankfully, he is. My mother met my father when she was 19 years old for the first time on their wedding day, looked around and asked which one he was. She didn't know it then, but the universe sent her a fairly woke dude, at least for his time and context in Punjab. Together, they worked hard to build a life, rebelling against their families to send my sister and I to the best Western schools in the country, despite their families' warnings that we would socialize with unrespectable people, reject religion and modesty, marry foreigners, and become women of loose character, all of which happened. So I had a loving home and a relatively safe childhood. But I was also growing up in the context of the post-9/11 world in the capital city of Pakistan. The terror attacks were becoming more and more common. There was a suicide bombing less than a kilometer from my home. More and more barricades went up every week until my city started to resemble a fortress. And where men weren't causing pain, God was. I lived through one of the biggest earthquakes in our history. Over 100,000 people died. I survived, but my best friend and my first love didn't. I had survivor's guilt. I needed to understand the suffering in the world around me to maybe even help make a difference, to make life meaningful so it would become bearable. So I did the only thing I could think of. I began showing up at the doors of nonprofits and asking them to let me help in any way I could. I carried medical supplies into a women's prison. I spent every day after school working with women and girls at a relief camp for those displaced by the earthquake. And when the government broke its promises to rebuild the victims' homes, I organized protests in the Capitol. My work would lead me to earn a scholarship to study at Stanford University, moving all the way from Pakistan to Palo Alto. Of course, after making the long journey across the world, I'd come to realize they weren't that different, both filled with male privilege, though the biryani in Pakistan is definitely better. After graduating, I'd co-found the Malala Fund with the brave and inspiring Malala Yousafzai. And as a result of her bravery and the impact we created afterwards, I'd get to bear witness as she became the youngest ever Nobel Peace Prize winner. And then I would do something no one expected me to do. I would start a kitchenware business called Our Place. So how does building a kitchenware business become my story? The truth is, as I was running as fast as I could to heal the world, I was breaking within. My mother never taught me to cook because her dreams had been constrained by domestic burdens, and she wanted to set me free. But then I moved halfway across the world, 7,000 miles away from everyone I loved and my entire culture, and I couldn't feed myself. First few years, I was in heaven on American junk food, Pringles, Twizzlers, donuts, ice cream, donuts with ice cream. But then I got sick. I didn't understand it for a long time, but eventually I realized that my body was breaking from loneliness, from unhealthy food, from a lack of solid grounding on which to root my ambition. So I began learning to cook. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love and got married. He's Persian, Amir, from a culture similar to mine, rooted in food and love and poetry. Now, I tell my husband when we met, I want an absurdly big dinner table in our home so we can cook and have people over and create a space where people from everywhere feel welcome. Learning to cook was interesting, though. I remember walking into my first kitchenware store in America. There were rows and rows of pots and pans. I asked for a starter set. I was just learning to cook. I was given 16 pieces of cookware. I had grown up with 2 pots, a round one and a flat one. What's this one for, I asked. That's your stock pot for soup and pasta. What about this one? Well, that's for sauces. We call it a saucier in this country. I knew America was excessive the first time I walked the bread aisle at Walmart and saw 84 different varieties of bread. Hawaiian, honey wheat, gluten-free, Hawaiian, gluten-free, honey wheat. But this was on a whole other level. So I went home that night and told my husband, you should start a cookware company. He laughed it off. 2 years later, my husband came home and said, I have a great idea. I should start a cookware company. Men are geniuses. Would I do it with him, he asked. But kitchenware had nothing to do with my plans. I was working on girls' education, issues of funding women-led businesses. I'll help you, though, I told him. We'll get it off the ground together. So we began obsessively designing. We bootstrapped our savings. We took a 16-piece cookware set and measured every vector, every inch. And where they overlapped, we constructed a new shape. One pan that replaced them all, the always pan. It was deep enough to make soup or pasta, shallow enough to flip an egg, and so beautiful you'd never want to put it away. And it was non-toxic. Side note, most nonstick pans contain Teflon, PFAS, forever chemicals. They're bad for your health, bad for the environment. Don't cook on them. Don't worry, we're giving you each a free always pan in your goodie bag. Just look for that gift card. Oprah even called it a kitchen magician, so to quote Oprah, you get a pan, and you get a pan, and you get a pan, and everybody's getting a pan. But while I was obsessed with this problem, I wasn't going to start a cookware business. I was an activist. I had marched for civil rights. I had carried medical supplies. I had started the Malala Fund, right? Wrong. The more we built this brand, the more we realized that what we were doing was so much more than building a kitchenware business. That food was a way to talk about everything I'd been trying to say all this time. To build a bigger table, to find a new sense of grounding, to connect to my traditions, to live my mother's unlived dreams. My partner and I found our place in America by cooking food and sharing food with new friends who became chosen family. And there was no brand speaking to culture through food. We wanted to see our traditions represented, our culture represented. So we started our place. We launched the business in late 2019. It was quiet. We had one sale. It was my mother. We had another. It was also my mother. But then things changed, slowly and all at once. People tried the products. They heard about the brand. Gwyneth Paltrow and Jay-Z invested. Snoop Dogg and Cameron Diaz cooked with it on TikTok. David Beckham cooked with it on Netflix. And Selena Gomez even designed a collection with us. We crossed 9 figures profitably in our second year in business, making us, by all accounts, one of the fastest growing startups in the country. One product became 80 over the next 4 years. That same relentless design approach applied to appliances and tableware and prepware, multifunctional, clean, streamlined, beautiful. We built a team of 150 of the most talented creatives in the world, united under this one vision. The first kitchenware brand that's a lifestyle brand. We are building a bigger table. And we knew culture deserved its own dedicated space within the brand. So from the start, we dedicated a part of the business to culture. We called it Traditionware, collections designed to celebrate underrepresented traditions. As a Pakistani American, I had never seen my traditions represented by a mainstream brand, and I wanted to build a brand that would celebrate all our traditions loudly and proudly. We created a collection for Shabbat, working with Jewish artists to design a Halla pan and Halla cover. We worked with queer Japanese-Mexican ceramicist Mud Witch to design mugs that were full of pride. And we created a fry set for samosas and jalebis, all those delicious fried treats you enjoy for Diwali, working with Indian artists across the diaspora. And as our platform grew, so did our advocacy. In the midst of the 2020 election, when immigration rights were at stake, when our place in America was at stake, we took out billboards in swing states and asked Americans to vote for an inclusive vision of America. Because the truth is, we cannot talk about food without talking about culture. Fish and chips, it's not British, sorry Brits. It's Portuguese, and it was brought to the UK by Jews fleeing violence and anti-Semitism in Portugal. They would coat the white fish in a thin batter of matzah meal on Friday morning before stopping cooking for the Sabbath. The batter preserved the fish so it could be eaten cold the next day and still be delicious. Tea is Chinese, and curry, well, that's just a word you lot made up. This country literally colonized an entire subcontinent in pursuit of flavor and spices. Now, I know a lot of us get nervous when talking about culture. We need to be sure we're investing in culture, not appropriating it. But building that muscle is essential. Your patterns, your prints, your inspiration, it comes from places all around the world, not just Italy and France. Name it, honor it, celebrate it, center it. It's time. To sum up, the kitchen was a source of oppression for my mother, but it became a pathway to liberation for me. So, remain open to how and where you find deep meaning in your life. It may come from where you least expect it. Second, food is culture. Fashion is culture. Building a multi-ethnic brand rooted in true cultural inclusion is some of our most important work. Do this by building diverse teams, insisting on deep cultural literacy internally, and partnering with communities from start to finish. And finally, cook more often. We all deserve many more home-cooked meals shared with loved ones around the dinner table, because these are the moments that make life worth living. So, bon appetit, Noche June, Sahten. I look forward to breaking bread with each of you tonight. Thank you.
We live in a design era that glorifies minimalism and restraint. All you have to do is take a look around at the buildings we work in, the homes we live in, and sometimes even the clothes we wear. But according to the renowned designer Thomas Heatherwick, less isn't always more. Thomas is the award-winning founder of London-based practice Heatherwick Studio, recognized for its work in architecture, urban infrastructure, and strategic thinking. Amongst other things, he designed the cauldron for the London 2012 Summer Olympic Games. He imagined the iconic London Routemaster bus and developed the innovative Little Island in New York City. A lesser-known fact is that he actually got his start designing an avant-garde window display titled Autumn Intrusion for Harvey Nichols in 1998. Such captivating design is a stark reminder that we are experiencing a blandemic. As Thomas argues in his new book, Humanize, boring buildings aren't just an eyesore. They can profoundly affect our mental health and lead to physical issues with environmental repercussions too. Thomas is here to have a discussion with Ross Bailey about what we can do to bring the soul back into the spaces that we inhabit. Please welcome Thomas Heatherwick and Ross Bailey.
And place your book here. So for most of you, hopefully know Thomas's name, but for some of you that don't, you've certainly interacted with Thomas's world. As Imran said, from the London bus, Thomas, the London Olympics, Thomas, the Little Island, Thomas. And Thomas has developed incredible buildings that inspire us all. Now, you also inspire me. We get to have lunch every so often, and I get to go to Thomas's studio, which I always think is a mix between going to like the Mad Hatter or Willy Wonka's factory. You sort of walk in, you've got like all these weird and wonderful objects. You have these teams in every corner developing designs and ideas for the world. And then you sit me down, you pour a cup of tea, and I leave inspired. And the last time we met, we were talking about this book, which is about how do we make the world, as Imran said, a little bit less boring, and how do we make it more human. Thomas is an architect. Well, you shouldn't really call you an architect, but you build buildings. And he's got an unconventional background. Your mum was a shopkeeper in Portobello. You didn't go to architecture school, you went to art school. And then you designed those windows. How did you end up designing buildings? Was it something you always wanted to do? And did your unconventional background play a part in that success?
I don't know. Has anyone here had a conventional upbringing? I don't know. I was brought up around people who made things, and there's a down-to-earthness and a soulfulness that you experience, and it's only later that you call it things like soulfulness. And I was then coming to the world of buildings, having seen people who hammered metal or who made roofs of buildings using straw or who blew glass. And I got to do many of those things. And then I came to look at degree shows of people who designed buildings, and you couldn't see any buildings. And you just saw lots of drawings. And it seemed that, and I can sort of say this now with a clearer head, that world had the sweep of modernism, that was this amazing revolution, which was really changing how we thought about everything. And Sigmund Freud's ideas about the subconscious, all these different ways you could look at the world, had moved from as a world that made the world around us that we all share, that had somehow the hand and the heart and the head had sort of moved to the head and had left behind the hand and had somehow inadvertently left behind the heart. And so I suppose I didn't have an unconventional background accidentally. I sort of slightly just recoiled. I can see now, when I was 14, I thought, well, I'm not clever enough to do that thing that they do, because I had a sort of more practical kind of intelligence somehow. I call it that. I don't think intelligence is how I felt. It was. I thought, I'm not clever enough. And so I carried on making things, and I sort of carried on going into my mum's shop on Portobello Road, being a bit embarrassed because her shop was the bead shop, if any of you went there, and she ran it for 20 years. She never went on holiday because she thought, well, because all these lovely young girls who all wanted to work there and run it and do things, but they didn't know enough about all the technical details, so she wasn't going to have a holiday because someone coming into that shop might not get the level of expertise that they needed. And I was interested in order and systems and ideas, so I thought you should put all the different beads in little compartments and have this all set out. And I couldn't understand why we didn't have a fitted kitchen at home like everyone else. And we had random bits of furniture, and her shop had huge baskets full of all the different antique glass. She wasn't really interested in high, most precious things, but in a way, semi-precious and glass. And there was fluff between things and between the old shop fittings. And I was like, you can't have a shop with fluff stuck in places. And a sign saying, please touch. And many people just go into the shop, spend all day carefully picking out a bag of beads. And then at the very end of the day, they'd empty the beads and walk out and go out. So it was like a public service somehow, but run by enthusiasts. And in contrast to that, there was this very cerebral world of buildings. And then I was looking at buildings and wondering subliminally, like, what's happened? Because the new buildings being built somehow seemed a bit passionless. And so I studied design, wood, metals, ceramics, glass, and plastics, which is what most of the world is made out of. And I built my first building when I was 21 because I realized the people training to design buildings had never made anything. And so I spoke to my tutors and said, why don't we make a real building? And they all went, no, make a model. And I went to the architecture department and they said, that's not architecture. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make a big cabinet for people to go inside. And I ran everywhere I risked the third year of my degree course and ran everywhere. And and suddenly realised that all the people who said don't do it, actually, they were kind of quietly thrilled that you were doing it. And we approached 26 companies, and they all sponsored. Every single person we approached sponsored the materials. So the building was about as big as this stage. And I ran everywhere because I didn't know whether it would be possible to make it happen. And all the caretakers at the college in Manchester would kick me out at 9 o'clock because they were shutting down. And then they'd quietly say, and you can climb back over the wall over there. And someone in the year below me who was very popular, he said he wanted to help me and gave me half a year. And because he was popular, all his friends came too. And so it suddenly just taught me that most people are a little bit bored. And that if you do what it appears to be the wrong thing to do, it might actually be the right thing to do. And that gave me the confidence to start my studio. And we're now, we're doing some of the biggest buildings in the world. And we've just finished in Silicon Valley, Google's headquarters. Amazing. And in a way, it all came from those sort of confidences and the making with your own hands what that teaches you.
And when you think about outside of the buildings that you've done, what this book is about, and that our streets are becoming sterile, we talk a lot about fast fashion. And fashion started producing lots of clothes on assembly lines cheaply and quickly. How has that affected the built environment?
Well, I know you and I really share a passion, really, for the bit of the world around us that we all share. It seemed funny to me that there was a world of art that was sort of trapped in galleries that only a sort of small percentage of the world actually enjoy and witness. The world's gone art crazy, and that the bit we share is the streets, and that in some senses, what I felt had been lost in the way we were thinking about cities was to see yourself as in public service somehow. And that really it's the streets are the walls of public life. And after COVID, more than ever, when we learnt to remote work and remote buy and remote, you can get a PhD lying in bed and all of those kinds of things, actually how precious, how streets are dangerous if you don't have people on them, and that we need the imaginative versions of ourselves to be being more generous to the people around. Buildings are designed predominantly for the people inside the buildings, and the success or not is gauged by the people inside the buildings, but 1,000 times more people are outside those buildings. It's only very privileged people who will work inside a spanking new building I build, and only very privileged people who will buy something in a spanking new shop I might design, or so anyone like me. And so I just realized, for me, I love the joy of the unexpected, where no one's called it art, no one's called it craft, and no one's calling it landscape design, no one's calling it architecture. It's just the imagination manifesting in the world around us. And it was interesting when we were talking about this talk and talking to Imran before and saying, what should we call the talk? And I was just talking about the head planner in Singapore had said, buildings don't tell stories anymore. And Imran went, that's the name of the talk. And actually it's true, our world around us, we understand the world through story.
Yeah.
And you can have story in the cup of coffee, and you can have story in the pavement, but the biggest backdrop are these gigantic walls of public life that are the building faces, and we don't talk about them enough. And we say, no, I put public art in front. I put lots of trees on the street. And you have all those lovely benches. You go, yes, but the biggest backdrop that we aren't discussing as a society is the emotional impact of these buildings. And our mental health is 76% of us say that buildings affect our mental health. But there is no component of understanding the neuroscience of the buildings around us in the education of the building designers. Yeah. And that's a big problem. And there are scientists like Colin Ellard in the US who their studies are showing us that, that one of the speakers earlier was talking about cortisol levels and how we need visual complexity. And there's been one big fat trend in the last century that was to have an absence of visual complexity. So buildings became flatter, shinier, more monotonous, more sterile, more repetitive. Less was more. And yeah, that's great in your yogic life in your bedroom. But in the public life we share, you starve the brain when you take away complexity and you take away stories and diversity. So
everywhere ends up looking the same, right? Like all of the cities.
It's astonishing.
Like you can, I think about a conversation we had recently when I'm thinking, if you go to Paris, we can probably remember a street on the Marais or certain buildings. I can't even remember the new part of Paris. I don't know if I've ever been.
When you ask people where do they want to go, you're coming to a city, where do you want to go, the old bit or the new bit? No one's going to go to the new bit. They'll say, go to the art museum, because that'll be amazing. The new opera house will be amazing. But the 99%, we've had a catastrophe. And I'm not arguing, let's build classical buildings again, or let's make everything curved, or let's make everything square. What we just need is more diversity. And we actually learnt that our brains need visual complexity. And I know in a way we're here talking about fashion. We have had this weird thing that the average age of a commercial building is 40 years. So if I was a commercial building, my grave 13 years ago
I'd be close.
Would have been set up. And the dirty secret of construction that isn't being talked about, we do talk about, and I bet everyone in this room has thought about flying. You know, what are the greenhouse gas emissions if I fly to London and come to the Business of Fashion Voices conference? And that's 2.1% of greenhouse gas emissions, the total of aviation. Construction is 5 times that. So when you demolish a building, and the whole of construction and running of buildings is almost 40% of all greenhouse gases on the planet. And so it's the powerless thing. Every one of you probably sort of feels a bit powerless, it just kind of happens. Whereas you do feel empowered with buying clothes or buying something. So we know the problem of nutritionless fast fashion, but we aren't talking about nutritionless fast architecture because it's not quite as fast and it sort of feels like it happens slowly and you feel your power. I'm not a planner, I'm not a developer, I'm not an architect, but unless society speaks, it won't happen.
But it feels like...
that was the reason for this is really trying to start a national conversation. It's written there's a double-page spread with what the architectural profession calls archibolics, which is the language that gets used by professions to keep feeling clever about themselves, that excludes us all.
But just quickly, Thomas, I want to touch on the mental health piece that you touched upon, because what I found fascinating reading this is that good buildings actually turn us on. Like the bit of our brain that gets excited about sex and food and is very primitive actually gets excited by buildings. So you're not sort of a designer coming out there going, look, I'm a London designer, I'm going to be pretentious and tell you all what beauty is. You're saying that actually the science shows us that this is what we need as humans when we're living in those cities. Do you want to share just like one piece of that research? I found the one in New York so interesting with the guys wired up and what they saw.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've thought that it's all about what do I think? And I think we're in potentially a very exciting revolutionary time where we can move away from what you think and what you think you're supposed to think because we can measure your body. And so by attaching sensors, you can see the body going into stress. When there is a starvation of necessary information, we all need about 11 million bits of information every second. And if you're walking along a street, to feel good, you need every 5 seconds, something needs to change and to catch your curiosity. And that's what our brains need. So we've been inadvertently starving by applying philosophies that might be right when it's applied to a different scale or a different type of thing, but when it's the world we share, we've ended up inadvertently having a cultural revolution, stripping buildings of their stories, of the complexity that we need, but not because Chairman Mao did it. We've sort of done it to ourselves, thinking that we're being clever while doing it.
I want to quickly move you on to what you talk at the studio about emotion as a function and how you think about cities interacting. And you've often said that when you are designing a building, you're first thinking, how is a human being actually going to interact here? And we know that a lot of architects, it always seems like it leads from ego and just what they want. I want to quickly jump to 2 projects. One of them was this.
Quick flick through my career.
Yeah,
that's real good.
Well, we're running out of time. So one is the little island in New York.
Yes.
And one was the vessel.
Yeah.
And people who know the vessel know that, sadly, lots of people have ended up committing suicide on this building.
4 people.
Four
yes,
people.
yeah.
And we know also that the London Island, the little island, in New York, has become this incredible part of the city that, I was there a few weeks ago in New York for Halloween. It was a heat wave. Everyone the next day, it felt like half of New York City was using this island. What does it feel like as a designer when you create something in the way that you intend humans to interact with it, and people end up interacting with it differently to what that intent was?
My passion is public projects that we share together. And that's why we don't do people's private homes. We don't do artworks in galleries, because there are already fantastic things and people doing all of those things. And so what excites us is trying to give excuses for society to come together and have joy. But that means you will also sometimes have darker sides of that. And the vessel in New York was built, it was above code, all the balustrades.
Yep.
It was at one point the #1 backdrop for Grindr for everybody anyone. And it's and
another intent not expected.
But the mental, you can't predict but you can do your best to put yourself in the shoes of others.
Yeah.
And who predicted that there would be a pandemic and a mental health problem that went with that?
Yeah.
And a focal project can suddenly find itself at the center of people's response to that. There weren't accidents on it. It was intentional. But that's being resolved next year. And so it should be possible for everyone to go back up again. But, to see New York coming together and say, look, you've got Little Island here. But, in terms of the creative processes, that project came about not actually by being asked to build a little island. We were being asked to make a performance structure to go on an existing pier that was going to be built, which was going to be a sort of wider bit of the West Side Highway path. And so, you and I have talked about artificial intelligence as well.
Well, let's
and
on that. Let's just quickly jump.
Oh.
And let's be quick because we're running out of time. But I want to jump back a few slides. Someone could do that for me to the Olympic torch. Go back about 2 slides. And one more. Perfect. So what I loved about this is you were talking about this recently, and I was very nervous about AI. And actually, I think my thoughts on it have changed while being here. And now I think that this idea of prompting actually very much relates to how you spoke about this story. So to set the scene, Thomas was asked to design the Olympic cauldron back in 2012. And the brief that was given to you by the British government was, it's got to be on the roof, and by no circumstances can it move. And you created a cauldron with 1,000 moving pieces. So talk us through what happened there. And I found it really fascinating because I thought if that brief had been put into AI, what had come out would have been very different. And to me, it's why someone like you will always exist. So could you tell us this story?
Well, the mantra form follows function. I actually feel that's exactly what we do in the studio. There's 250 of us, and we are thinking about what is the function of something. But as you said, emotion is a function. And so I've spent so much time going to conferences and there'll be someone showing this incredibly sustainable new building that works on one light bulb for 10 years and it's amazingly well insulated. And you're there thinking, it's kind of not functional because I don't mind if it was destroyed tomorrow. And so emotion is a function. You can't say something is functionally successful unless because we are feeling beings.
Yeah.
So in each project, there is the sort of grindy, logical, functiony bit, but there's that we think of as function, but there's also thinking about feelings. So with this project, as Ross said, we were asked to make the Olympic cauldron. By the way, we had not been selected to do the stadium. We had not been selected to do the project outside that was became the orbit. We'd not been selected for something else as well. So we'd given up. We were there thinking, we're here in London. Here, we could help in some way with our Olympics. And then Danny Boyle and the head of ceremonies have said, well, would you do the flame? And no moving parts. And we've strengthened the roof of the stadium to take all of this extra weight. I think it was about 200 tons. And so the heart of the way we work in the studio is strategic. And I find it interesting when something is visually interesting, people assume you're a mad artist who just sort of randomly does things rather than you're actually a hard-nosed, calculating person thinking about how will someone feel, what's the journey. And so there was a huge round stadium. So step one, where's the most powerful place on a round stadium? Is it over there? Because you've got the infield, which is where the main a lot of the sports happen. Then you've got a track that's in around that. Then you've got the seating around that. Then you've got the structure around that. Then you've got a road around that. Everything is in this concentric rings. And Danny Boyle had said he didn't want a ceremony that was somehow broadcasting to the world. He wanted it to be rooted and anchored. And it seems sort of having it like a kind of police siren that you can put on an unmarked vehicle to go faster and take away seemed less logical. And it would have to be bigger. And they also said, we don't have that much budget. So the higher you lift it, the bigger it has to be impactful. Because if we pick the center of the stadium, that's where all the people would be standing. And even a medium-sized thing would look huge next to little people. So that was one line of logic. The other was trying to diagnose why had they said no moving parts. And when you thought about it, and we did some research and just thought, oh, Sydney got stuck for 2 minutes. And the people who make the Olympic opening ceremonies there's a sort of traveling band who do, like, there's one guy I know who's done.
So it was sort of fear.
There's one, there's one guy I know who's done 40. And you think, how can you have done 40? But anyway, he's done 40, including winter and youth and all of these. And so we just thought, you actually don't mean no moving parts. What you mean is make sure it doesn't go wrong. And that's a different brief. Yeah. So we ended up thinking, and part of it was Olympic cauldrons. It's a great honor to be asked to do it. But when you then go to yourself or to somebody else, tell me an Olympic cauldron.
I can't remember last
Tell me, what cauldron do you remember? And you go, 1 billion people see this thing, and 1 billion people instantly forget it.
But there was one that people remember.
And that's what really hit us, is that the only one that people could remember was the Barcelona 1992 Olympics, which was where the cauldron was lit by the archer who was shooting a flaming arrow that was then going to go in the cauldron. And you think, why do we remember that? And you remember it because of your anxiety. You were worried. What if they miss? But then your brain is thinking, there's a little man who's there who's going to light it if he misses. And then you think, what if he shoots the little man who's there to do the thing? And so that happens in all our brains in just a few seconds. And so just thought, actually, why? And I don't remember the cauldron. Think, so actually, you're designing a moment, not a thingy. And who cares if it's a spiral thingy or a triangular thingy or a square thingy? And that was a powerful moment. So that's when we realized Everyone expects the big thing that somehow is going to get lit. And then the other side was knowing how many of the Olympic communities in all the different countries have hardly any money. And also, we're going to design a thing that you can never light again, that pigeon poo is going to be gathering on for years to come. And you're just going to be there going, oh, you know that thing in the park? And so we just thought, could it be gone afterwards? And that's why, in the end, we thought, could it actually go back to everybody? And this idea of not making a cauldron, making 204 cauldrons, and they were all different and they were all unique bits. And you had the famous athlete walk in, the person with the name of the country and a child. And so they brought in these little bits. And we knew people were thinking, where's the cauldron? Where's the cauldron? Where's the cauldron? And then kind of it not be where you expect it to be, and then have a moment where these tiny things as big as your iPad just all lifted and became, just for 2 weeks, they came together.
Yeah, it was magic.
And so, as a symbol of not squabbling, because Olympics touch me because it's the one time sometimes countries come together and don't squabble. And then they went back and they're all across the world.
I genuinely still remember this. And you've always said to me this idea that, you know, memories aren't created by objects, they're created by moments. Now, we're out of time, so we're going to have to end. But I wanted to just show this building because it's my absolute favorite. And I did want you to sort of talk us through it. But I mean, quickly, I can see everyone there. You'll have to promise
I actually have
to stop. Okay, fine.
Okay.
But we'll end there. But this building's absolutely incredible.
And there was one piece of corn that we cut out of the heart of a building made of tubes. That's how it's like it is.
Thomas, you are incredibly creating stories. Everything else you'll have to get in the book, which we wanted to talk about. But thank you so much for your time. And Imran, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
The book is in everyone's goodie bag, so make sure you have a look at it. It's a very tactile, interesting book. Our next speaker, John Jay, has played a pivotal role in shaping how we think about branding and creative strategy, and specifically, its ties to culture and community. John was actually scheduled to speak at last year's Voices, but couldn't take part because of the tragic passing of his son, Matt, just a few days before the event. We're really honored that John is here today to share his personal journey and tell us how he arrived at the eye of the cultural storm. While crafting his talk, John was deeply inspired by one of last year's speakers, Mo Gaudat. So let's have a quick look at that inspiration.
Best news is, believe it or not, the minute an AI is out there in the world, it's no longer within the control of the developer. Nobody ever tells the Instagram recommendation engine what to show you tomorrow, right? You can tell the Instagram recommendation engine what to show you tomorrow, right? And in my mathematical calculation, if 1% of us, only 1% of humanity, okay, would stand and say how beautifully you said, there are so many inspiring moments. If we show the good side of us in front of those machines, 1% of us, those machines will be intelligent enough to say, humanity is a divine being.
I took last week off to spend time thinking about my son and to think about what I could possibly say today to add value to your life and to this conference. So I put a lot of thought, and I changed it all last night. So let me start anyway. This is really what I want to talk about, because I want to bring us down to earth, because after Keith's talk about we're all artists and all these wonderful feelings of positivity, we still have some problems to deal with in this world and some problems in our business as well. This is driving me crazy, this idea that good enough is good enough. Why are we here today, really? Well, Mo's presentation really set me off last year, and I wasn't able to come. But I'm going to share a little bit more detail about what Mo talked about, and that brought me here today. This Harvard Business Review quote here. Unfair algorithmic competition leads to the crowding out of authentic human creativity. So that's really the gist of what I want to talk about, and that is human creativity. And I think, despite feeling really well and being the eternal optimist, that we are facing a crisis in creativity, quite frankly. And it's quiet, and it's growing. So what Mo talked about that struck me last year were things like this. By 2029, the smartest being on Earth is not going to be human. Okay, let's dissect that a little bit. Maybe we need to have a dialogue. What does it mean to be the smartest? Then he said in 2035, all future designers will be replaced by machines. Okay, maybe the role and definition of designer is going to evolve, and maybe this definition is going to change. And 2045, AI will be 1 billion times smarter than humans. And his analogy was, if the human was a flea, AI would be Einstein. That's the world. So who am I? I certainly can barely read Mo's writings. You know, who am I to be standing on this stage and asking these kind of questions? What gives me the right, what gives me any credibility to even ask these questions on this stage today? Well, some of you come from a family of retail, family of fashion. You may have sourced the materials for fashion. You may have designed the clothes. You may have sold the clothes in fabulous establishments. I too come from a family of apparel. This kind of family. While you were sourcing and designing and manufacturing, I was washing your clothes. I was sorting through the dirty socks and ironing your clothes. And Imran, I can iron the crap out of a shirt, so if you ever need a shirt iron, I still got it. So I grew up here, Columbus, Ohio, in this laundry, without speaking English, and drawing cars and watching car commercials to learn English. So I learned all the car commercials from the 50s and so forth. And the real answer, why am I here today, is because I was carried on the shoulders of greatness. I'm going to show you some people. This is a little bit of a memory trip, memory lane down here that we're going to stroll down. I'm only here because I came from very little. I am only here because of the shoulders that I stood on. And I want to share these people. And why these people are important, while I feel that there is a crisis in creativity, what these people I'm going to show you built incredible businesses, but they were businesses that protected creativity and the soul of creative people. That's what made them interesting. This is for Richard. Mr. Marvin Traub, the late Marvin Traub, former chairman and CEO of Bloomingdale's. Richard said to me, and I didn't know Richard had time at Bloomingdale's. He said, "Oh, but John, you were there in the glory days." That's because of this man. So, what did this man do? He changed the traffic on Lexington Avenue to go the other direction so Queen Elizabeth could get out on the right side of the car in 1976. Look at this Lexington Avenue scene. On July 14, 1979, he signed a trade agreement with the Vice Minister of Foreign Trade with China. A department store signed a foreign trade agreement. He gave me the opportunity to do incredible things. This was my first ad. Double page, New York Times, announcing the era, a new era, 40 centuries of ritual and opulence. So you have to understand what these promotions were like. Total store, total new product development, going into a country, asking the countries to show what are your native skills, let us put our modern thoughts and help you create product for the world for the first time. So, full page, New York Times, Snoopy comes to the Forbidden City. Pop cultural experiment. Full page, New York Times. We create, through our knitwear department, entire collection of children's sweaters. Full page, New York Times. We work with the silk weavers to make exclusive garments in the lingerie department. And we bring the Forbidden City robes out of the museum for the first time, out of the Forbidden City to New York City to be an exhibition. So when we have these expositions, they were not just ads and marketing, but major exhibitions and major documentary films that we would produce. Look at this quote from the New Yorker. Bloomingdale's is the only retail store with its own foreign policy. And to back it up, look at this cartoon. The Chinese are saying, talking it over, and if you can't see it, it says, before we decide on our next expansion of people's industry, shouldn't we check with Bloomingdale's? This was the incredible power of this store. It was a cultural force at that time. It was not simply a department store. 5 years later, I go back with Herb Ritz, the incredible Herb Ritz photographer, and we photographed the Beijing Opera for one day. I bring Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista for this whole trip. The country promotions keep going every year, and the very last one, before Marvin left, my last one, was called Tempo d'Italia, all on Italy. Major exhibitions, major films, everything that we did at that time. And I'm going to show you a small clip of one of our videos featuring Franco Moschino, the late Franco Great Moschino, and it's the 40th anniversary of the brand. So I thought I'd show a small clip from that.
Non credo che potrebbe esserci un altro esempio di Moschino. La stessa mafia ha una bellissimo look. Io credo che se gli altri italiani che non sono d'accordo con me conoscessero davvero quanto io amo l'Italia, credo che domani mattina diventerei il Presidente della Repubblica e forse anche il Papa contemporaneamente.
So, his sense of humor, amazing. Too amazing. Because the shopping bag he did for me said, "In pizza we trust." Well, demonstrations started happening in City Hall, downtown in New York. It was the only Bloomingdale's shopping bag that we had to pull from the stores ever. Here are statements of culture. This is what Marvin allowed me to do. Make every bag a statement of the zeitgeist, a statement about culture. No bag had a name on it. No bag had a logo on it. And every time the new bag hit, and I always kept them surprising. If one was photography, the next one will never be a photography, it'll be a painting or whatever. And every time it hit the street, everyone knew, hey, did you see the new Bloomingdale's shopping bag? No name. It broke every Harvard case study in terms of marketing consistency. Here's an example. Postmodernism takes over the world. On the left, 1982, I go to Michael Graves to talk about his thought about anti-modernism. Then Ettore Satsas takes his take on Memphis, and we develop all these products with the Memphis group. Every New Year's, I celebrate the New Year and put a little twist to it. This is London. This is Neville Brody, the master typographer, graphic designer, the 1988 New Year's bag. 1986, Mark Kostabi. Mark Kostabi was a star, was the unknown star at that time at the new Palladium Club, which Ian Schrager, Isozaki was the architect. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember the architect's name. So you can see in the postmodernism, he's making fun of the AT&T building here. He's making fun of Bloomingdale's by putting cash registers on top of our heads. No name. Our fashion campaigns we were the largest advertiser in the New York Times. Full page, double page, back page, all the time, all week. All the best people in the world at the time. This is Deborah Tuberville on the launch of our intimacy campaign. Hollywood, George Holtz, our swimwear new department, and then Mizell with Linda. This was called The New Cool. So these were brochures and booklets and films and videos, and as well as full page in the New York Times every week. The next people I want to talk about are the combo. Mr. Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, and Mr. Dan Wieden, the late Dan Wieden, who founded Wieden and Kennedy. I want to show you something that was filmed in my studio. Dan was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Phil knew this. It was public. So he came to my studio to make a point. He had something to say about Dan for history.
So yeah, I just wanted you to know that I was not only a shy kid, but I was little for my age all the way through college, kind of puny, and easy to ignore, which always kind of bothered me.
Yeah.
And the expression that really bothered me was when I would say people would shrug their shoulders, and I said, I don't want people to shrug their shoulders at me. And that was kind of a mantra that stayed with me for a long time until I met Dan Wieden. After that, nobody shrugged their shoulders.
I'm no dummy.
Creativity is what gave Phil Knight the ability to walk through the city and not have anyone shrug their shoulders at him ever again. It was Dan Wieden who built this company, who protected, and I'll talk more about this later, about creativity, and Phil Knight, of course. Now, Wieden and Kennedy, some of you may not know what Wieden and Kennedy is. I'm going to be very biased. I'm going to say it's probably the greatest advertising agency in history. This is our lobby here. This is in Portland, Oregon, probably one of the most famous creative spaces in the country, celebrating always the people when you walk in. In all of our offices around the world, we have the same wall, celebrating our people. Fail harder is our mantra. Now, I arrived from New York City in November of '93, and Phil on Monday, and Phil Knight calls on Thursday. Phil says, I'm really worried. I think my brand is losing relevance on the streets of New York. What are we going to do about it? So remember, this is '93. The city was changing. Lots of cultural things were happening in the early '90s in New York City. This culture was rising, and I needed to figure out what exactly was the problem with the brand. So the first thing I did was to go into the city and listen and recorded and made lots of videos and recordings so I truly, truly showed respect for the street, respect for the neighborhoods, and respect for the people of New York. From it came a new philosophy of thinking of how to solve problems. The City Tech was really a metaphor for cultural digging, going deep into a culture before you open your mouth as a creative. Know what you're talking about. Understand and show respect to the audience first before you think about marketing. It's called the New York City, so the NYC. And then what I did was, I knew already that basketball was, New York City was the Mecca. So what we did was we made a campaign to celebrate no stars of the NBA, no college stars, only the stars of the neighborhood. Those people that were legendary in the 70s and 80s. Celebrating the heroes, celebrating the courts. These were all in New York City only. And then I took the lexicon off the street, the slang of the game in the streets of New York. So whether it's boof it, which means I missed the shot, or whap, which is the sound of the ball going through the net. All of these were full-size posters on bus shelters throughout the city. So an underground message brought above ground. And then, of course, product, using graffiti artists and working with them to bring, these are all billboards around the city, all in New York. And then the last thing I did for them was to make the first NYC, the first city shoe for the Air Force One. So Dan now gives me, I'm there for 5 years, Dan gives me the keys and says, I need you to go to Tokyo. I want you to open the hothouse of our agency network. I want you to open a shop in Tokyo that will make work unlike any of our other offices. Now remember, we had New York office, Portland, and Amsterdam at that time. Here's opening day. Well, not quite opening day, and I had recruited some people. And this was a really breakthrough. So I moved to Tokyo to open this office. And Tokyo, again, like New York, was the epicenter of a new creativity. And that has been to be the eye of the cultural storm, the term that Imran used, that has been the gift that all of these people have given me. They have placed me in the eye of this cultural movement. People that I brought to the brand, such as Hiroshi Fujiwara, those who know streetwear understand this is the godfather. This is the god of all. And he did a pair of shoes for my staff. So these are the most limited edition shoes in the world. 50 pairs that Hiroshi did only for my staff. This is the Presto shoe. It changed Nike, a new platform. Remember, everything was very thick sole and so forth. This was a lightweight, multi-sport shoe. So we launched it in Japan, and we knew what it looked like. We knew how it could perform. But my question was, does it have a sound? Does each shoe have a sound? Could it have its own music? So I went to 4 different DJs, and they created the music for each shoe, the sound of each shoe. So all of these were vinyls and DVDs that we created. You can't see it over here, but there's a phone. So all of the videos and everything were put on the Japanese phones. This is before iPhone, I think. So here's a video for Presto. So what's unique about that, of course, is that there's no athlete in it, because sport and Japanese teenagers had a different relationship. They were not active so heavily in the key sports. So we had to find a way for this new Presto shoe to have relevance in their life. We knew that we wanted them to be active, but not necessarily in traditional sport. Then one of the things I discovered was that many of the Western agencies in Japan really didn't care to have Japanese clients. So the first thing I wanted to do, I thought that was incredibly rude. So what I did was I created a music label, independent music label, not related to clients, our own P&L, in order to pay back the creative community, in order to recruit the best young musical talent, best visual talent, best storytelling talent, and give them a platform to show their craft. So this is a DVD for the group Haifana. This is a DVD for DJ Uppercut, and all of these had multiple videos that we showed, and then we had club events every weekend to support the teams, to support this. This was, again, an independent music label, not related to our clients. Let's just show a trailer from Haifana. So I wanted to build a reputation for the agency because we were nothing. We were the tiny little office against the giant Dentsu. I wanted to use this label as the major recruitment. So to show this office cares about creativity, this office is here to help build your creative vision. So the ultimate creative freedom. When I want to go back to Dan Wyden, he spent 40 years building this agency. I was a partner. And what he did, this is before he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, that goes back 10 years ago. He decided to make the agency a foundation. He built layers of protection to prevent the agency from ever being sold, which means his family will never reap the giant benefits of millions of dollars in the sale of the agency, which means that the company could fail at some point. But he wanted to protect the creative freedom because he knows that if a buyer comes in, there's going to be layoffs, there's going to be cultural clashes, there's going to be efficiency issues, there's going to be accountants who say we have too many creatives, too many art directors. He is not going to let that happen. He will not let that happen. So his quote to me was, if the agency dies, it will be of our own doing, not because someone else killed us, not because we had an owner. Next person. This is a man I work with now, Mr. Tadashi Yanai. Now, when I first met him and we first started working together, he was a client of mine at Wieden+Kennedy Tokyo. He had no stores in Tokyo yet. So it's not the Uniqlo you may think of in your city. No stores, 2.5 hours by plane south of Tokyo in a small mining town. Very rural stores. And yet last week, look at him now. The cover of Time and the rebel. Outspoken, unbelievable leader. And he said to me, John, if we're going to work together, what is the most important thing? How do we start? What's the one thing you will never give up on? And I said this: we will always respect the intelligence of the consumer. So, what's unusual about this is that what we make is casual wear. Casual wear is a Western invention. You have to understand there was no history of clothing in Japan until 1865, when Admiral Perry forced open the ports there. They wore kimonos, so there was no outerwear, dinnerwear, whatever. There was no Western history of clothing, and yet we are trying to move clothing on the evolutionary scale and change it. This is a video of the very first campaign, one of many, that launched the brand, which I launched in 1999. This is before they had a store in Tokyo. This was the opening, one video from the opening of the Tokyo store.
俺が誰にも負けないものっていうのはロルカの詩の朗読でしょうね。スペイン語と日本語で3時間もぶっ続けでやります。ロルカの詩と歌を両方やります。Y en el café de Chinita dijo Paquiro a su hermano. En el café de Chinita dijo Paquiro a su hermano. Soy más valiente que tú, matorrero y más.
So, he never mentioned the fleece. He never talked about it was warm. He never talked about the fit. He never talked about the price. He never talked about the colors. And we broke the records. This is what put the brand on the map. This is my latest, more recent creation, and that is about inspiration for our staff. This is arguably the best creative library in Tokyo. Started from zero. Opened the doors of the new headquarters that we designed, and on Monday, 2,500 out-of-print books on architecture and art and design. This is my baby Anne. I put in a coffee shop, and I put in a little DJ booth so that everyone could bring their vinyls in and play their records when you're having coffee. Now, I know this sounds like, okay, Google can do, like, not in Japan. They said, what's your goal when you're opening this new headquarters that you're designing? I said, well, I'm going to bring joy to the office. And they go, that is going to be difficult. There is no joy in the office in Japan normally. This man is incredible. You can see from the headline in the magazine, he's no longer CEO and chairman, he's now the chairman of the board. World's most creative CEO. He was the champion of human creativity. And we traveled the world for inspiration. And every year he would say, where have we not gone yet for inspiration? And so one year, well, I'll go back to that. So he called one day and he says, I'm in China, and I had not opened the office in Shanghai yet. I've got 4 hours to myself. What should I do? So one of the things I learned from Diane von Furstenberg was the art of the salon. Gathering creative people at your house and sharing creative ideas with people. So I did that all over the world for the agency. And here's the salon I did for Mark Parker in Shanghai. 50 rappers, snowboarders, skaters, artists, illustrators, fashion designers, all surrounding Mark there, all sharing. They each had 15 minutes to show what they make and why China is on the rise. This is in 2006. That's Mark in the middle there. Here, you can see who's the famous guy over there. He said, where have we not gone yet? And I said, have you been to Art Basel yet in Miami? He says, no. I said, let's go there. Kanye's there taking lessons in contemporary art. He hears that we're in New York. He says, do you mind? Are you going to New York? He hears we're in Miami. He says, are you going back to New York? Can I get a ride with you? Well, Mark, it's your jet, it's not my jet. And so he comes on. And instantly, he opens the computer, opens his backpack, all the drawings, storyboards, sneakers, everything he had drawn. The guy is genius. This is, for those who know, the birth of Yeezy. Right there, on that computer, on that jet. Now, we all know they had a falling out and it went somewhere else with 3 stripes and so forth. But this was the birth. Why did I leave Wieden Kennedy if it was the greatest agency of all time? Why would I leave Phil Knight? Why would I leave Mark Parker? Because of this little company that I discovered 2.5 hours south of Japan. I thought it had incredible potential that was still untapped. Why did I think it had potential? Because this is the foundation of all we do, everything that we do. Shinzen-bi, truth, values, and beauty. This is everything that we do. Do we do it well every day? Are there stuff that we do that aren't always beautiful? Are we at the top of the game of marketing and creativity yet? No, quite frankly. That's my job still. I've got a lot to do. But the main thing that we do is respect. Respect for all, made for all. Make clothing. And this is what I describe. This is my job description, but it's also maybe a description of the company. What do you do, John? I create the highest quality of experiences for the greatest number of people on earth. It is about respect. Bring quality to everyone. Make quality affordable, but make it stylish and make it cool and make it, sometimes trendy even. Sometimes. And so this is what I created. GCL, Global Creative Lab. This is my dream when I pointed to Mr. Nye. I'm not there yet. I want GCL to be the heartbeat and the center of the company. To be the center, creativity and innovation, to be the center, and to have HR and research and store development, store operations. I'm not one of those satellites. I'm the sun. I want to be in the middle there. I'm not there yet. Check with me a year from now. We'll see. And collaborate with the creators and institutions of creativity who share our philosophy of respect. So, the great joy I have in my job, I get to work with MoMA, but not only supporting their art programs, but in creating product. I get to work with the Tate Modern in creating product for all of them. I create with the Louvre. And we have all these incredible events that we support on Fridays, but the fun part is to work with the developers with the product as well. And I wish he was still here, my hero, J.W. Anderson. God, I have to tell you, I did a terrible shoot. My team did, it was my fault. I was not scared of showing the bad work to Mr. Nye. I was scared of showing it to him, to JW. This man is incredible. He's very modest, but what he knows about art, what he knows about ceramics, and what his support for artists is incredible. So obviously we do a collection with him every year, twice a year. Christophe Lemaire, our Uniqlo U collection. Claire, our newest collaborator, extraordinary woman who's really bringing a lot of new ideas. She's been extraordinary to work with. And then this is brand new. This is the relationship that we created with Central St. Martin's. And that was really an extraordinary experience because, of course, they're one of the most famous fashion schools in the world. And I came in with this premise that, believe it or not, we're more radical than you. Let me show you why. And they go, what are you talking about? Aren't you the team that makes khakis and polo shirts and so forth? How could you be more radical? I said, what if longevity was radical? What if we could help you make a collection that would outlast your lifetime even? What if truth and transparency was radical? Because it is in our business. Radical has many meanings. They came back with a series of extraordinary designs and things that and I'm going to go, can I go back one slide? Sorry. One of the projects, rethinking how to adapt to a post-climate change world. So we made videos, films, books, all on these projects, working with the students at Central St. Martin's. We do magazines to support the neighborhoods of art, Soho and London. So, to wrap up here, what is our collective future for all of us in this room? Well, this is what I'm worried about. Relentless optimization. It's great on someone's spreadsheets. It's great on someone's strategy papers for business. But what does that really mean? Is it this? Efficiency at all costs? What is efficiency at all costs? What does that mean to what we do? Are we helping to create algorithms of mediocrity? This is my concern, because I think you all can sense everywhere we go, quality is getting diminished, product is diminished, service is diminished, and it's seeping in through the doors. It's not a revolution, no one's pounding the door and bowling you over. It is just happening, trickling in. And we, as creative people, have to put our foot down and stand up at the court in the C-suite and prevent this from happening, even though we may not have all the power in the room, but our lives are at stake here. Mediocrity is seeping in everywhere, everywhere. So, what's Martin Scorsese's pet peeve? You're making great films, you're making music, you're writing great things. Why is it all called content? We just homogenize the crap out of everything. It's just called content. Let's make some content. I hate that in me. Let's be some content makers. Oh, let me get up this morning. I'll write you some good content. If I had fortune cookie business, I would say, content my ass. Is good enough good enough? Answer that in the C-suite. This is the challenge. Everyone is saying yes in many cases. So, I know we're on a high, we're all artists and everything, but I think creativity is under attack from within our organizations. We don't have to point to technology and scientists over here. It's happening inside our organizations. It's creeping in through the floors. And the enemy is not AI, but the management who values quantity over quality and originality. We matter. Creativity by humans do matter. Look at this quote here. Human creativity is characterized by irreplaceability. Human creativity involves taking risks, exploring new ideas, and pushing boundaries. It requires an emotional depth and nuance to create content. There's a typo here that AI wrote this. That generally move people enthusiastic about. Human interactions working with mentors like the people I presented to you, working together in person, please, exchanging ideas without even a word, an eye contact, watching their eye, reading the body language, reading the temperature of the room. That's all part of the creative process. Collaborating is our future. So one of the things in the 20 minutes out of 30 that Mo was talking about, the doom and gloom of the world, at the end, he said, I have an answer. Our answer is we are the parents of AI. We will teach it ethics. By teaching ethics to AI, we will set the standard for the future. So my question is, can we teach AI the value of humanity and the power of human creativity? Respect. That is what we need to give more to each other and in everything that we do. When we are saying good enough is good enough, we are losing respect for ourselves. All of those incredible mentors built businesses, supported creativity, supported people like me. But who is my greatest inspiration and mentor? Finally, at the end of the day, after spending a week, my son. He was the founder of an artist residency that was devoted to bringing emerging artists to America. That work will continue. And it's called the End of Summer Artist Residency. New campus is being built for the Japan Institute. Buildings will be built probably in a year. So you'll all get an invitation to come for the opening. Good enough is never effing good enough. Thank you.
It can't have escaped you that we're running a bit over. So we're going to make a little schedule change for all of you watching at home. Diane von Furstenberg and Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy will be in the final session, and it fits perfectly, so it was meant to happen. Everyone here is really hungry. For everyone at home, go grab some lunch or breakfast wherever you're at. Programming will resume here at 3 p.m. with our 5th and final session, Live Your Best Life. Farewell from Oxfordshire. Everyone here, go get some lunch. I'm sorry we ran over. Bye.